You know, that's a social safety net that exists in almost all of Europe that doesn't exist in the United States. You have millions of people who work hard every single day, but if they get sick, they could potentially lose everything. And in a country as wealthy as ours, that's not acceptable to me. So we are going to work hard to make sure that we have a healthcare system that won't be identical to what you have in Europe. Each country has its own traditions and approaches, but that provides people quality, affordable, accessible health care. And then I would like to see us in the United States take the lead on a new approach to energy, because none of the developed countries are going to be able to sustain their growth if we don't start using energy differently, and the world cannot survive all countries using energy in the same ways that we use it. You know, I was meeting with the Indian Prime Minister yesterday after the summit, a very good and wise man, Prime Minister Singh. And he was talking about how Indian growth rates have gone up 9% every year. They need to grow at that pace in order to bring hundreds of millions of people in their country out of abject poverty. Desperate poverty, right? They have to grow at a rapid pace. Now, he actually is committed to working towards dealing with the climate change issue. But he made a very simple point, which is a point that I understood before the meeting, and all of us should not forget, and that is that you cannot expect poor countries, or relatively poor countries, to be partners with us on climate change if we are not taking the lead, given that our carbon footprint is many times more than theirs per capita. I mean, each one of us in the developed world, I don't care how environmentally conscious you are, how green you are. I'm sure there are some green folks here. Yes. I don't care how green you are, you have a much bigger carbon footprint than the average Indian or the average person from China. And so we in developed countries then, it's critical for us to lead by example by becoming more energy efficient, and we also have to harness technology and share scientific breakthroughs in order to find more sustainable energy patterns. Now, I've got other things that I want to do, but that's a pretty long list. Let me go on to a few more questions. All right. Now, I know there's some other Americans in the crowd, but do me a favor, Americans. Wait till we get back home, and I'll do a town hall there. Because I want to hear from my French and German and European friends. All right? Wait. This gentleman right here in the glasses.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Matthias Kutsch. I'm a student from Heidelberg, Germany. And my mother tongue is German, but my French is not good enough, so I ask my question in English. You mentioned in your speech that we are a lucky generation. We live in peace, we live in democracies and free states, and we are very pleased to have this situation in Europe. But this is not the case all over the world, even not in Europe. Look to Belarus, for example. There's an autocratic regime, and so my question concerns the many children all over the world that live in poverty under human rights violations. They have hunger, they have no education, and other problems. So what is your strategy, Mr. President, to solve this problem?
Good. Well, it's an excellent question, and First of all, I think one of the things that we should be very proud of from the G20 summit yesterday was that and other mechanisms to provide assistance to emerging markets and poor countries that, as I said, are bearing the burden of a collapse in the financial system that they had nothing to do with. The problem is so many of these countries had export-oriented markets, and when the economies contracted in our developing nations, it made them extremely vulnerable. You know, you have a country like Botswana, which is actually a well-managed country that has made enormous progress, but their main revenue generator is diamond sales. And they have literally seen the diamond market collapse, in part because they couldn't get trade financing, in part because the demand in developed countries has dropped off. So we started to make progress there. Our most important task right now is helping them get through this crisis. Over the long term, though, we've got to have a strategy that recognizes that the interest of the developed world in feeding the hungry, in educating children, that's not just charity. It's in our interests. There is not a direct correlation between poverty and violence and conflict and terrorism. But I can tell you that if children have no education whatsoever, if young men are standing idle each and every day and feel completely detached and completely removed from the modern world, they are more likely, they are more susceptible to ideologies that appeal to violence and destruction. If you have no health facilities whatsoever in countries in Africa, these days a pandemic can get on a plane and be in Strasbourg or New York City or Chicago overnight. So we better think about making sure that there are basic public health facilities and public health infrastructure in those countries, because we can't shield ourselves from these problems. So that means developed countries have to increase aid, but it also means that the countries who are receiving aid have to use it wisely. And my father was from Kenya, and when I traveled to Kenya, I had just been elected to the United States Senate. Everybody was very excited, and they greeted me as as if I was already a head of state, and there were people waving and lining the streets. I went to speak at a university, and I had to be honest, which was America has an obligation to provide Kenya help on a whole range of issues. But if Kenya doesn't solve its own corruption problem, then Kenya will never grow. It will never be able to provide for its own. And so there's nothing wrong with the developed nations insisting that we will increase our commitments, that we will design our aid programs more effectively, that we will open up our markets to trade from poor countries, but that we will also insist that there's good governance and rule of law and other critical factors in order to make these countries work. We spend so much time talking about democracy, and obviously we should be promoting democracy everywhere we can, but democracy, a well-functioning society that promotes liberty and equality and fraternity, a well-functioning society does not just depend on going to the ballot box.
Watching BBC World News, we're bringing you live coverage of a town hall, a meeting of the US President Barack Obama with students from across Europe, taking place at the in Strasbourg as a NATO summit is about to get underway.
Need to recognize in building a civil society that allows a country to be successful, and hopefully that will that approach will be reflected not just in my administration's policies, but in the policies that are pursued by international agencies around the world. Okay, good. All right. All right, right up. Well, I've got two of you, so you have to choose one. Which one should I call on? I don't want to. Oh, you're standing right next to each other. Oops. Well, I'm sorry. You know what? He actually called on the. No. I was actually pointing down here. I didn't see those two ladies back there. Here you go. This one right here. Go ahead.
Well, hello, Mr. President. I'm sorry. I'm from Chicago.